to gain power, then what you should want out of events is you should want to bring about events. This is really complicated, so pay close attention here. You should want to bring about events that strengthen your friends and harm your enemies. Okay, serious, sophisticated rocket science. Now, when I look at the Trump administration, it's difficult for me to avoid realizing the fact that what did even Trump's Department of Justice spend the Trump administration doing? It spent the whole Trump administration prosecuting Trump and his friends. Yeah. Moreover, the whole establishment basically spent the entire 4 years of this administration basically going, full Woodrow Wilson on basically anyone who was even tangentially close to Trump. And that had very real effects
take the shard.
On a lot of people I know. Arguably, it even had very real effects on me. In fact, I'll say it did.
And me.
And were those effects positive? No. They were not in the slightest positive.
No.
And so, what am I doing when I elect Trump? Well, I'm harming my friends. What am I doing to my enemies by electing Trump? Well, I'm tripling the revenues of the New York Times. Multiplying the revenues of the ACLU by a factor of 10. Nice. The SPLC, God only knows. They're just like going like roll around on the gold coins like small hog at the end of the day, right? And they're fat, so the coins are embedded in their tissue. Sorry, that was a little too visual, but
God, you're right.
Like it's been amazing.
You're right.
It's been a boom time.
You are right.
Left, and when you think about, what they're able to sell to their customers.
You are
Let's say, you're a lib housewife somewhere. Like, what do you say about, saving the whales? We'll talk about that.
Good luck.
By the way, it was the Soviet Union that was killing all the whales. They discovered that all recently. Saving the whales, to meet quotas, and then the whale meat was thrown away. It's an incredible story. And basically, like libs, of course, were covering this up the whole fucking time.
Wow.
And oh yes, go research it. It's fascinating.
Wow.
But they don't care about the environment either. But
no,
any more than they care about keeping South Africa white. And, but they'll use it as an excuse, absolutely. And so you have all these things, and they're kind of bogus, and they're kind of divorced from everyday life, right? And then this housewife, and she's is her marriage? Who's married? Right? Like she's getting through her day. Maybe she's on antidepressants, right? And then this storm comes out of nowhere.
Don't jinx it.
This figure from the past, this demon
from the 1950s
that we thought we quelled forever, right? And then suddenly, basically, instead of worrying about climate change, you're worrying about Holocaust 2.0.
Yeah.
And then literally. Yeah. Well, figuratively, but also literally. Holocaust 2.0. Holocaust 2.0. And then literally, you, the housewife, have a chance to be in the resistance.
Yeah.
Never thought you could be in a resistance.
So fun.
The French resistance. You're Luke Skywalker. You're in the Maquis. You're fighting back. You're the hinge of fate. You're the hinge of destiny.
Yes.
You, right? This stuff is running through your veins. And the thing is, if you were into politics or causes or making a difference or having an impact before, was it part of your life that you valued? Yeah, it was like drinking beer. You're like, yeah, I'm someone who I like an IPA, very hoppy, not too hoppy. Yeah, does it make me feel a little tipsy? Does it make me talk? Sure, it does, but I'm in it for the taste mainly, right? And then suddenly, these people's brewery, the bartender comes around and she's like, would you like to try our new crack ale? And you're like, what is the crack? She's like, it has crack in it. We put crack in your beer. Come on, you got to try it just once, right? And you take this beer and you drink this beer, and then suddenly you're like, wow, it's just wow, right? There's this famous Reddit post. If I can digress a little bit into Reddit, there's this famous Reddit post that I saw recently. It's like, I'm not a Redditor, but this is like, so amazing that it was brought to my attention. It's by a user named Spontaneous H. And Spontaneous H, you can guess what's coming next. He posts this post on Reddit in some random group. He's like, yeah, I was really bored today, and I was like, man, my life's just not very interesting. So I was like, I'm going to go just down to the corner and buy some weed. And then he was like, I went down to the corner and I found this guy, and he's like obviously a dealer. And he's like, do you have any weed? And he's like,
Hey,
No.
look, Samson.
but I have heroin.
Fresh.
And so this guy's like, what the hell? So, I was like, well, whatever. That's exciting too. So I bought some heroin and, I'm going to snort some and see what happens. And he ends his post there. And then the next day he's like, man, I snorted that shit. I'm never going to do it again. It was incredible. It felt like a 10-hour-long orgasm. Wow. That was amazing. I can see how people really
Ultimately,
get into
it'll be
this. And then like 3 months later, he's like, yeah, I was shooting up all day. I'm completely hooked. And like the end of the saga is like years later. He's like, yeah, just to follow up on all of that. Yeah, I've been clean for a couple of years. It's really good. Don't do heroin.
Not firepower.
Right. And so, here's this poor housewife, right?
Got it.
She's like this, housewives in like 1906 that get hooked on, morphine that's not called morphine, right? And she's taking this crack beer and this stuff is amazing. Okay, it's a little funny, but like it makes her feel like she's never felt before. She's part of the French resistance.
Yeah.
This is amazing, right? And so,
she's historic now.
She's historic. She's part of her time. She lives more intensely, and she lives at her most intense when she's reading the New York Times or maybe Mother Jones, right? And so she's basically her Jacobin. Even she's getting into the harder and harder stuff. And there are these groups. There's direct action. They're on the streets. Like this is becoming her life. It's becoming who she is, right? But 2020 rolls around, and this is like the Ragnarok, the Götterdämmerung, the fight. This is the time when we're going to defeat Hitler, right? And we're going to beat this guy and everything he stands for. And you stand out and you fight. And it's like this amazing dramatic ending till the end. Like, is there going to be a military coup? Is there going to be martial law? Are Proud Boys going to be raping and killing in the streets? Persons of color? All of this could happen, right? And it could still happen. It's still visible. Like, they still fear it. And, arguably, probably not as in their fantasies, arguably it probably should happen, but it's not going to. And it's certainly, I won't say that Proud Boys should be raping and killing in the street, but basically history will look back at the fading days of the Trump administration, and it's quite likely to say you could have done anything. Why didn't you do something? And be that as it may, you couldn't actually do anything. The historians there will be wrong. It's totally impossible. The instrument is too weak. We're not ready to do it. So you can't just, via victus, woe to the defeated, accept your fate. And but on January 20th, when Joseph Robinette China Joe Biden is inaugurated, all of that will be over, and will you be able to take the Luciferian character of Orange Man still lurking out there? He could run in 2024. Will you be able to take him seriously? Well, especially if he gets banned from Twitter and indicted, it fades, and then
ultimately,
why do you even read the newspaper?
What's your
why
point?
do you even exist?
Why do you live? Yeah,
why do you live? What's the point of waking up in the morning?
What's the point?
And so basically you get this, here you have, this junkie, this like normal suburban housewife who's been marriage has been ended over this. It's like, okay, there is the thing of the right-wing QAnon person who goes down that rabbit hole and destroys his life, right? That's a thing, but there's also the other thing. This is something that has become part of people's lives.
Oh, yeah.
And then they have to go back and start caring about some tax bill or like healthcare or something, climate change. So the Great Reset, build back better, and the thing is, okay, it's a great slogan, build back better with Biden. That's 4 B's. That's great alliteration, right? It's a great reset of Klaus Schwab. Have you seen Klaus Schwab? He has this uniform, the Davos man, the World Economic Forum guy. He actually has this like Battlestar Galactica, outfit that he's crafted for himself, and he talks like Werner Herzog, but this whole show put together doesn't have 100 of the star power of the Trump show, and so this crackhead housewife has to go back on beer. And that's going to be a very, very painful, disruptive thing. Not only that, this bar that introduced the crack ale is doing amazing business. Yeah. Right? Like all the housewives from all around are coming. They have their tables. The thing is hopping. no pun intended. And then, you know, in January,
Good luck with that.
you come back and it's just beer. And you see all these people sitting around with these bowls. You know, they used to be able to get drunk on beer. So they got like really tipsy and really excited, and now that's just dead. Furthermore, when you and so the bar starts laying off people, right? Because the bar has done this classic kind of business thing where you expand into a market that you think is like a growth market, but actually turns out to be a fad. So it's basically like you started this like massive conglomerate to sell hula hoops in 1982. And then 1983 comes along and like the hula hoop is dated as hell and none of the girls want one. And you have this massive factory, right? You know, what do you do with your hula hoop factory? And you know, so you basically, you're turning the New York Times into the world's biggest hula hoop factory. And it doesn't, it's a, you know, there's part of the government in one way, but it's also a business. It doesn't like to lose money. Nobody likes to lose money. Nobody likes to lose clicks. Nobody likes to see those charts going like that. Like, that's just an ugly, depressing, horrifying feeling, right? So let's get back to Machiavelli.
Yeah.
Machiavelli says,
look,
you know, the
Samson.
purpose of power is to reward your friends and punish your enemies.
Yep.
What did we do by
Good to
electing
see-
Trump? We
So how's it
rewarded our enemies and punished our friends.
NC badges are okay with this?
What are we doing by electing
Solve it.
old China Joe, especially under
Tips
these
before we
kind of
roll.
sketchy circumstances?
Don't take
Nice.
your
Nice.
We are
Ultimately,
rewarding our
it will be
friends and
speed,
punishing
not
our
firepower
enemies.
that'll
Nice.
And,
Nice.
and so, you know,
Take
like
the
the pain, like you would even see stories about this before the election. I mean, where they were like, they're
need to
not
hit all
like
the
writing
checkpoints
to
or
like
we'll be
Republicans
disqualified.
telling them to vote for
you
Biden.
wanna hang a bit
They're
too.
like, you
I'll
know,
be
we're
the
not
way.
even writing
Where do
to
we
for
start?
Democrats to tell
The
them to
shark.
vote for Trump. They're just like, what are we going to do about this, guys?
Yeah.
Because that's when the polls were they believed the polls and knew they were going to win. And what the hell are they going to, I mean, they'll muddle through, they'll manage. But the thing is, it'll be a painful and unpleasant experience. Moreover, when you look at DC and the Biden era, you'll see basically this town, which is basically Brezhnev incarnate, and it's going to be fronted by China Joe Brezhnev, right? You know, and you're just like, so the camouflage of like, I can be the enemy of Trump and the resistance against Trump, which allows all these normies to basically feel super rebellious while they're being super conformist, that's all just stripped away. And the shield is gone, the mask is on. You're seeing this thing as it really is. And, you know, you're going to see it like the grandma killing propaganda, like that's just the start, you know, and moreover, you're going to see this contest, right, between the center left and the left, which is already breaking out. Because, of course, you have, it's not that there's really an ideological difference between the pragmatic center and the hard left. All of those people started out with that ideology. What made them the pragmatic center is that they realized, well, they just realized that there's a lot of good things in life, right? And that, you know, these good things are more important than ideology. And so, you know, that's inevitable. There will always be some people who don't realize that. Those people will be left behind. But, you know, more it's like the, you know, the Clintons, they realized, you know, the good things in life, basically. You know, it's like there's a story in Vanity Fair today about this guy, Doug Band, who was Bill Clinton's body man, and, you know, sort of parlayed that into a $700 million stake in a consulting company. I mean, not to mention the like vast, he ran the Clinton Foundation, of course, which is this like vast open sewer, right? You know, and of just unimaginable miasmas, like, you know, of just like the perception and far more than the perception of impropriety emanating from this vast
Pure
open
corruption.
sewer. Pure corruption, right? You know, barely even bother to disguise it.
Right.
And as in the Hunter Biden thing, which they barely even bothered to disguise. I mean, this is how, like the way, you know, Hunter Biden, you know, the Biden family is just running payments through Hunter. That's exactly how they do it in like basically all of Africa. Yeah. You know, I know this well because my father was a diplomat in Africa, and I discussed this matter with him. And he's like, yeah, that's basically how it's done. But that's how it's done when nobody's looking. Like, you're just like, oh yeah, that's my son doing business, right? You know, and like, you know, and you're just like, oh, these are not the droids you're looking for. You know, you may go about your business. And that's basically how that kind of corruption can exist, where it's just unbelievably fucking blatant in this very elderly system. That's all now completely, that's on top. Like, you know, I mean, the people who are handling the Hunter Biden laptop should be shot. I'm glad their incompetence produced the election outcome that I wanted, but they should be shot. They should have just WikiLeaksed it. And but that stuff's out there. It'll get out there. There's all kind of wonderful material in there. It's there's more interesting.
Wow.
I mean, the really interesting thing are basically the payments to Hunter Biden, sometimes rated through Jim Biden, Joe's brother, where basically Hunter is pulling on all of this loot, and then he's turning around and sending the loot
Keep it up.
to the rest
Don't
of the family.
jinx it.
Yep.
And so it's just this like I mean, you would have to be imagining that this somehow could be clean takes the level of suspension of disbelief that's just I would believe in Pizzagate before I would believe I would believe that Hillary Clinton was holding. I still don't know what a pizza-related handkerchief is before I mock
Nice work,
Pizzagate.
V.
If somebody tells me what a pizza-related handkerchief math is, I'll go full left on Pizzagate.
Next time,
But
first
I
place
would
will be
more
ours.
easily believe that
Let's
Hillary
hold up at the
Clinton is
finish line a
holding.
minute.
I'll believe in the straw man. I'll believe that Hillary
Got it.
Clinton is holding child hostages in the non-existent basement of Comet Ping Pong before I believe that these were totally legit transactions
every
that just
year.
resulted this from
My
Hunter Biden's
fourth
expertise
time
as an energy
this.
trader. And
I thought I won.
or as a credit card. He was earlier he was a
Get you
credit card
hooked.
master.
Yeah.
And
Give it up
Yeah,
strategic
until it
consultant for MBNA before
What's
he
the
was out of
difference?
college. Right. So the thing is that all of this suddenly
Wins the glory.
you're
Why
seeing
didn't you
the
race?
system
It's like
as
he's
it
got
is.
laser
You're
focus.
seeing the system at
You're like
war
ready?
with these crazy leftists who occasionally are actually very happy to point out what it is because it's their weapon, not the right wing's
Of course.
weapon.
Who doesn't?
So it's a sort of ugly
See?
internecine
That we got in
spat.
And I always like to
There
finish
are
what I
and
start, so
you're just like
win these damn
I'm like
That is
I'm
the
all in
plan.
on popcorn calls, basically.
Moving
I'm
up to
just
the
like,
shop?
I don't know where the popcorn is going to come from. I think we're going to
Yeah,
see
sure.
serious national
let's go.
shortages of popcorn in the summer of 21, fall of 21, early 22, because, you have to plant that shit. It's not regular corn, it's popcorn. And we're going to need a lot of popcorn for the Biden administration. And so I'm basically like, moreover, when you look at the education that has been given already to the deontological American right, who believes in these institutions and is sort of unable to separate these completely compromised institutions from what they actually love, which is the beautiful country and the people in it, is just like they're starting to, sense that there's a difference here and that this thing that pretends to be grandma is maybe not actually grandma. Maybe grandma is dead and this thing has eaten her and is wearing her skin. Just a thought, like occasionally, like, for example, does grandma really have 110 pointy teeth? I don't think so, and it's these sort of little glimpses that tell you that maybe there's a different narrative out there that involves basically the sort of rational, realistic equivalent of we're ruled by lizard people. And so, we're ruled by lizard people in various forms. The theme and sort of intuitive feeling of, kind of greatest generation thinking about Washington, boomer thinking about Washington, if I can use a temporal slur, is fading, and instead you're starting to get this intuitive perception that this is basically the lizard kingdom of lizard people. And while knowing some things about DC, it is not the lizard kingdom of lizard people. Q is not real, and there is no basement in Comet Ping Pong. But the thing is, when you have the attitudes that you get toward these people as a result of believing all of these things are basically correct, and the truth about all of these things, although sort of more mundane than these wild visions, you've essentially grasped a spiritual truth that is true, even though your misinformation is not actually true.
I love it. I love it. So we've got to wrap up here, but I just want to
All
say
right.
my cheeks are hurting because I've been smiling for 2 hours now. You just white-pilled the election in a way that I've never heard before. So Trump derangement syndrome, one could argue, has been the most damaging thing to people like us and maybe to the entire world over the last 4
Sure.
years. And what we've done is we've gotten the best revenge by having Biden elected or letting
Yes.
Biden be elected, right?
letting Biden being elected,
Because
and
you're now depriving all these people of their crack, which was Trump, for 4 years.
Right, and you're substituting basically. Not only are you depriving them of crack, but you're basically substituting, chalk dust.
Yeah.
And so you're like, you have this. I mean, it's amazing, and there's just all these ways to it's such a weight off of your shoulder because suddenly you're in a position where you can just mock these people who really deserve to be mocked, and you don't have to defend Cheeto Hitler.
Exactly.
And the thing is, contextualizing Cheeto Hitler has been a big part of my job for the last 4 years.
And it's a pain in the ass, and I hate
it's a
doing
pain
it.
in the ass.
We don't have to do it anymore. We can just attack the guys in office now. freely
Can't argue with that.
Freely and funly, if I can say the word. All right, Thaddeus, this has been super fun, and let's do it again sometime.
Curtis, you're amazing and brilliant, and stretch my brain, and you make me laugh all the time. So we will do more in the future of various.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you to all unregistered listeners. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
I'm up in the stakes.
This is the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To join the new Renegade University, go to renegadeuniversity.com. To join the new
You two are ready to start?
You know. But you can't be a socialist. Socialism isn't even. Socialism and capitalism are both fake. Curtis Yarvin. My agents, who are everywhere, have made me aware that I have a small and quite discreet following among the post-left, a gaggle of young, difficult intellectuals who, though fully and properly disgusted with the American regime and all its works, might still describe themselves as socialists or even Marxists. Look, I love you guys. But this is a cope. You are not really a socialist, just an undercooked nihilist. To make you happy, I will spend half this essay debunking capitalism, confirming the truth you know.
Fight is over.
But you can't be a socialist. Socialism isn't even wrong. It doesn't even exist. Moreover, today, it can't exist. And the same is true of capitalism, though for very, very different reasons.
Thanks.
What I'll do today is to deconstruct socialism historically and capitalism financially. The problem with socialism is simple and easy to understand. The problem with capitalism is complex by human standards, if simple by financial standards. I do have a very small following among finance professionals, too.
There'll be fireworks.
No, this is not a gray mirror chapter per SE, though I may turn it into one, or part of one. GM hashtag 6.2, alas paywalled, is on its way soon. Socialism does not exist and cannot exist. You can't be a socialist any more than internet Nazis can be real Nazis. The party office is no longer issuing cards. They can be fake Nazis, of course, costume Nazis. Which may be better or worse, but for better or worse, is objectively a different thing. Socialism is not a party, but an idea, or an ideal. Yet the socialist ideology still implies conceptual membership in some movement. A solipsistic libertarian makes a kind of sense. A solipsistic socialist makes no sense, just as it makes no sense to be a Nazi, in a world where there is neither party nor Führer. What is socialism as a movement? Socialism is a mass movement of the working class to promote the interests of the working class. If this definition is proper, and if in the real world today there neither is nor can be any movement that matches the definition, there neither is nor can be any such thing as socialism. If there is and can be no such thing as socialism, anyone claiming to be a socialist can only be a fake socialist. Therefore, socialism both is and must be fake. Most of the post-left would buy is, but not must be. What they would say, if I am not caricaturing, is that socialism, once a true working class movement, has now become something quite different, the official ideology of the professional managerial class. But we have to fix it, and make it a working class movement. Again, and we can. Right? Almost but not quite. This post-left theory, while almost right, is not right enough. It makes the common mistake of correcting a bogus, but official narrative in the present, but not the past. As Cicero said, he who does not understand the past is doomed to remain a child. So anyone who can persuade you to misunderstand the past can hold you in permanent tutelary bondage, regardless of your intelligence, education, wisdom, or experience. You think you know, so you don't even try to learn. These PMC people are who I have called gentry, or armigers, or Brahmins. Nobles, basically. But a clerical nobility, not a military nobility. Not at all unusual in history. They are also the managerial class of James Burnham, and the new class of Milo Vangelos. Everyone now can see this culture clearly, and it is also my culture. It is definitely true that, in 2020, social justice is the official ideology of the PMC. It is also true that the PMC, as we know it, is a 20th century development. It is by no means true that 20th century socialism began as a working class movement. And this fiction is not just a historical curiosity. It means everything for the present. The first two steps. Socialism senza lato, including communism, progressivism, liberalism, and all other labels for leftism, none of which can be objectively defined as distinct, either socially or philosophically, from any of the others, always originates as an intellectual cult. Not that there's anything wrong with that. As an intellectual cult, since you are reading this, you are already in one, or nearer, at least, for every word you read, its natural believers are detached, disaffected scholars. For better or worse, there are always lots of these. Maybe you are one. So was Pol Pot. So, of course, was Karl Marx. So am I, of course. This is all 19th century stuff, and most people know it. But most people have a weaker understanding of what happens next. From this original position, socialism, while remaining an intellectual cult, becomes a fashion statement. As a fashion statement, its natural believers are the wealthiest, most sophisticated people in the country, the upper crust of the upper crust, 1% of the 1%. Is it weird that these people would have it in for the 99% of the 1%? Or is it human nature? The leaders of any socialist movement therefore naturally consist of a mix of the two types, intellectuals and socialites. Of course, the servants of the movement, the large numbers of people who give it power, under a political system which has decided that large numbers of people have an inherent right to power, are just who it claims. And as is de rigueur, Rigueur, the leaders claim to be the servants of the servants. But if socialism is the right word for a movement of the working class on behalf of the working class, it cannot be the right word for a movement of the aristocracy on behalf of the working class. These are obviously different things. Patronage and its thirsty fashion victims. We have a better word for such a movement: patronage. Patronage is the systematic creation and maintenance of economic dependency in exchange for political power. Roman aristocrats, the source of the word patron, measured each other's status by the number and quality of their clients, the dependents on their aristocratic largesse. So did medieval lords with their serfs. The word lord is from the Saxon hlaford, which means giver of bread. So, of course, did the southern plantation masters. It is never to be assumed that the empathy of patron for client, lord for serf, owner for slave, or socialite for coal miner, is inherently bogus. Not at all. It is normally genuine. Yet there is nothing that forces it to be genuine. Worse, even if it is genuine in intent, nothing forces it to be genuine in effect. And the more distant and abstract any direct relationship is, the weaker are the emotional bonds that could force it to be genuine. The socialite does not come out well in this comparison. We can say, socialism, in the 20th century, is an aristocratic movement, which intends to promote the interests of the working class. In the sense of our original definition, of a working class movement, which promotes the interests of the working class, there is not, and never in the 20th century was, any such movement. This absence does not prove that such a movement could not be born in our century. But it removes the inductive justification for thinking that such a thing is possible.
We're gonna get chipped.
The final step of socialism's evolution is the dissemination of aristocratic fashions into the middle classes, social middle classes, intellectual middle classes, financial middle classes. This creates the aspirational PMC as we know it. Like most middle classes, using the term in the current euphemistic sense, as upper middle class, meaning really lower upper class, 20% of the population at most, the PMC feels it's doing well anytime it's aping its betters. Yet for those betters, the true aristocrats, the motivation of the ideology is at least as much ambition as empathy. Moreover, the ambition tends to drive the empathy out, leaving it as a cold and sterile justification of a Nietzschean need to rule and win, and be the hlaford, the giver of bread. Everyone has seen the ugliness of these people. You think there must be something else, but no, this is all there is. And this ugliness, too, is aped. Somewhere, right now, in a school or office near you, someone is being humiliated and destroyed by small, cruel, thirsty souls for the benefit of the people. Do you have a tear for them? Of course you don't. You can't feel anything but power. Moreover, one of the most common copes among the best people on the left is to feel that while of course this shit exists, and is horrible, it does not represent the true spirit of the movement. That true spirit, rather, belongs to them. Their dream is not to slay the dragon, but to recapture that beast, then command it as the rightful owner. Can you see what you're doing here, kids? And do you think you're the first people to do it? Ambition is a natural human emotion. It lives better if it lives openly as itself. If you are drinking a bottle of wine a day, you are not just drinking it for the taste. The actual effect of socialism is always patronage, which always creates power. Whether or not you intend to get high on power, you will. Try to make sure it's at least real power, and not the sterile, voyeuristic simulacrum of it. Dependency cannot be separated from authority. If you give some man his daily bread, you are his lord. You may not even require him to work for it. That may be your lordly caprice. Your intent may be to benefit him, perhaps feeling that idleness is better than labor. But if tomorrow you change your mind, he has no choice but to dig you a ditch. Possibly all you want from him is his vote, which is exactly like a Roman politician bragging about the swarm of clients on his porch. At least the Roman patron knew his client in person, and often depended on him for service. You own the man not even for his work, but only for his head count, as a walking statistic. Dehumanize much? Indian political scientists have a term for this, a vote bank. At this point we scrape the bottom of the stale, sordid, inhuman racket of mass patronage that is the only possible endpoint of socialism, and indeed democracy itself, in the 21st century. As it really
We're gonna get
was.
chipped.
The alert reader will note that none of these historical assertions have been proven or justified above by historical evidence. True. No one can convince anyone of anything. If you are interested in this hypothesis, if you believe it possibly could be true, but are not already certain of it, perhaps you may find it in your interest to investigate its truth or falsity. I cannot help you investigate its falsity. I know it to be true. Here are some references that can help you convince yourself that it is. A good way to show that something is fake is to find the real thing, then compare the fake thing to it. For an authentically endogenous American labor movement, without intellectual or aristocratic ties, we have to go back before the 20th century. Both the Knights of Labor and its leader, Terence Powderly, have excellent Wikipedia pages. Note also the Rock Springs Massacre. While labor unions into the 20th century retain leaders with actual labor backgrounds, this once endogenous labor movement does not evolve into the socialist movement. Rather, it becomes ideologically captured by the socialist movement, whose political program and candidates it soon comes to serve with dog-like, unquestioning loyalty. After all, it is the job of the ruling class to rule. The early ruling class. While most intellectuals know of the 19th century intellectual stage of that movement, few know what it actually looked like in the early 20th. At this time, its centers were the winter capital and summer capital of the young American aristocracy, Greenwich Village and Provincetown. To read about the kinds of people who were involved in this early bohemian world, if you're in a hurry, just click Early Life, read about John Reed or Walter Lippmann or Lincoln Steffens, or about the women, like Mabel Dodge or Mary Heaton Vorse, or even Gertrude Stein, or the institutions, like the Intercollegiate Socialist Society. Or watch the realistic if hagiographic 80s movie Reds, with Warren Beatty as John Reed. As you click around these pages, Imagine teleporting any of these people directly to Burning Man. You'll realize that, except for their clothes, they would fit in perfectly. That's because they're the same social class, although not the same economic class. Well, not always. Now, try to imagine Terrence Powderly at Mabel Dodge's salon. If Terrence Powderly was alive today, he'd drive a jacked-up F-150 with Trump stickers. And in fact, the DSA is arguably the legitimate organizational successor of the ISS. And strangely, it has exactly the same kinds of members, mostly not as rich though. The bohemians of that age weren't always rich, either. They were rich or brilliant, but more often than not, both. Despite the enormous damage they did to the world, they had good intentions, and they also did some good. This is what socialism, in the lives of those now living, is. It is an aristocratic and oligarchic ideology of patronage. It has never been anything else. Vanity, status, and ambition are central to its appeal. While it sometimes does good things, nothing forces it to do good things, and everything tempts it to seem good, rather than being good. With what results we see. And it looks nothing like a working-class movement to promote working-class interests, like the Knights of Labor, who promoted working-class interests by massacring the Chinese competition. Not that you would want to identify with that. In any case, it was 150 years ago, in an America more alien to us than any country today. So much for socialism. It is certainly possible to imagine a tradition of government for the good of the working class, and all other classes as well. But such a tradition would have to be a new one. It would have to focus on results, not goals, and it could not sully itself, morally or intellectually, by any connection to 20th century socialism, or anything else fake. Like capitalism. Capitalism does not exist and cannot exist. The definition of capitalism is a free market in capital. Uncomfortably long pause here, maybe till someone in the audience snickers. No, really. Capitalism is not just having companies that make stuff. East Germany had companies that made stuff. Capitalism is having a free market in capital. Raise your hand if you think we have a free market in capital. If you didn't raise your hand, go find a pen and paper and write down 2 dates. The first date is the last year we had a free market in capital. The second date is the next year we will have one. If you can, try this exercise in a room full of finance professionals. I predict that your results will be all over the map. If the room is big enough, the first date may go back to the Bank of Amsterdam. What this tells you is that no one has any goddamn idea. Whatever we actually do have, it is to capitalism, a free market in capital, as the Delta Quadrant is to the Federation. We barely have any idea how we got here. We have no idea at all how to get back. In fact, we suspect it's impossible, which it is. Here is a very brief summary of the U.S. financial system. It works by losing money. Because the dollar is the global reserve currency, it can lose as much as it wants. It loses money in lots of ways, but mainly by giving free money to rich people. Here is a slightly longer summary. The U.S. financial system works by manipulating interest rates to increase asset prices. For many decades, the Fed manipulated only short-term interest rates and let the bond vigilantes set long-term interest rates. This was not a free market in capital, but it was closer, and that old bond market created real fiscal accountability, even for the United States. The bond vigilantes, needless to say, have gone wherever the Vigilance Commission disappeared to. Now the Fed buys $120 billion of treasuries a month, setting the 10-year risk-free discount rate below 1%. The price of a capital asset is a function of this number. If the rate is zero, the present value of a constant and permanent revenue stream is infinite. Managing interest rates means manipulating the price of capital. So there is nothing remotely natural about the perpetual rise of the stock market and the housing market. Cut off the heroin steroid drip, and you'll see what these assets are really worth. Asset price inflation is a regressive stimulus. It's logically equivalent to giving vast amounts of helicopter money to the rich. It's pure trickle-down economics. Can we even call it anti-socialism? Also, there is a plain English word for a perma-stimulus. The U.S. economy is fully addicted to this incredibly fucked up regressive stimulus, which is far less effective in producing spending than progressive stimulus, giving free money to non-rich people. It also creates far less utility, because the marginal utility of $1 to a rich person is much lower. This is not capitalism. This is a Simpsons caricature of capitalism. Any reasonable person, seeing this system for what it is, would find it horrendous. But no reasonable person can think of any way to rescue it. There is no way, at least, no reasonable way. Again, we have presented an argument without substantiation. Let's work through this in more detail, since even most finance professionals struggle a bit with these ideas, using the classic 19th century methods of literary economics. Math fags BTFO. Hey math fags, you gave us this monster. Or at least, you didn't complain about it, did you? And if the point is insufficiently made, we'll reiterate it by designing a transformation from this monster to a free market in capital. This transformation will not be possible, which is why capitalism does not exist and cannot exist.
I'm wondering more how it ended up on the ground.
A praxeologically equivalent transformation.
Yeah.
Praxeology, the philosophy of motivation, is jargon from Austrian economics. In the thought experiments below, a praxeologically equivalent transformation is any change in the financial system that leaves everyone's motivation substantially unchanged. For example, a stock split is perfectly equivalent. You log onto your brokerage and see your position. It has changed, though you did not change it. You have twice as many shares at half the price. If a company you have stock in is bought by another company, or bought out for cash, at the current market price, though it's usually higher, something has changed a little. But neither of these events changes your personal net worth. Therefore, neither of these events changes your motivation to buy a Porsche. The same would be true if you logged on and saw that all your positions had been closed out for cash. Perhaps you are no longer betting on assets you want exposure to. That's annoying, but again, your net worth hasn't changed. Your spending profile does not actually change. So nothing, really, has happened. Therefore, we can construct a praxeologically equivalent transformation across the whole U.S. economy, in which everyone's personal net worth is cashed the fuck out. The Fed buys all financial and financialized, for example, housing assets. Even your home equity turns into cash, and your mortgage payment is now your rent.
Best stay on our toes.
Your bank account is now your Fed account, and if you owed any debt, you owe it to the federal. This is stranger than the above examples, but still fairly sound in its equivalence. The gambling dollar. Since this simplifying lens is equivalent, we can look through it at any time, and we can look at it across time. We can even imagine a version of the Fed account that lets citizens invest with the federal. Instead of their balance being fixed, static dollars, citizens can put their money in gambling dollars, which expand and contract according to performance metrics of various East German-style state enterprises, rather like a 90s-style tracking stock. Of course, since the Fed now owns all the stock, it owns all the companies. But it could even go farther and let you gamble on football, movies, politicians, or horses. And of course, since it is in America's interest to force everyone who wants to save to gamble, gambling is positive sum. This is how the regressive stimulus launders. It's nasty cash. Welcome to Uncle Sam's Casino Economy. At Uncle Sam's, the only way to lose is not to gamble.
Here somewhere.
But while Sam would run a popular casino indeed, strangely, many citizens have no interest in adding speculative information to the market, because they have no information, and are not in fact speculators, or even gamblers. The solution is index dollars which gamble on everything, presumably including all the teams, movies, politicians and horses. The investors receive generous returns for adding zero signal to the market. This is obviously retarded. This is capitalism, an obviously ridiculous financial system, but whose incentive structure is equivalent to the financial system we have now. If the two systems could somehow be swapped out overnight, everything would keep operating normally. Mainly by giving free money to rich people. How important to the economy is this regressive stimulus? Well, how big is it? Thankfully, our friends at the Fed have prepared a handy chart. We can see that between Q1 2016 and Q1 2020, a normally good time for stonks, the total personal net worth of Americans increases from $106 to $127. This loss of about $5 trillion a year is more than 5x the fiscal deficit. And between Q1 2020 and Q3 2020, as the interest rate pedal is really pushed to the metal, this number leaps up to $140. This loss is more than 4x the fiscal stimulus. So yes, the regressive stimulus is huge. Of course, it has to be, because it works so badly. As a reductio ad absurdum, imagine that we gave all $13 trillion to Jeff Bezos. This would generate very little consumer spending at all, and, of course, consumer spending is business revenue, which both employs Americans and drives PE ratios. We are starting to see which of these effects is more important. Remedial accounting for finance professionals. But how are these losses? They're not losses. They're gains. LOL. This line of thinking always reminds me of the slightly dim Todd Solondz character, who gets hired as a strikebreaker. Then a picket line shows up and calls her a scab. She's like, I'm not a scab. I'm a strikebreaker. Even if we forego the transformation, of course increases in stock prices are losses. As anyone who has looked at a balance sheet is aware, equity is a liability, just like debt. The valuation of a company is a function of the profit stream it is expected to generate. When its stock goes up, the amount of cash it is expected to generate goes up. This can be very stressful for the company, just like having too much debt.
I'll be in touch.
And with the transformation, there is no difference between Jeff Bezos' Amazon stock going up by $200 billion and the Fed computer bumping his account balance by $200 billion. One could argue that Bezos deserved the former, or the latter. Accounting is about who has what, not who deserves what. The zero-sum asset market. One could also argue that the East German model is bad, because stock markets serve the very important function of providing CEOs with objective accountability. Once the companies are all nationalized and report only to Comrade Ulbricht, all they get is subjective accountability, an inferior good.
Yes?
At least if you look at East German cars. This is true. But it doesn't require systemic asset price appreciation. A stock market, which is a zero-sum game, in which the market capitalization of the whole market does not change significantly or predictably, can provide even more accountability. In fact, it provides more, because there is no beta, only alpha, in such a market. Confusing beta with alpha is a major cause of the cruise control fat cat CEO. In a boom, not even God can tell the difference. How do we create this alpha-only market? Reviewing the transformation. Let's review and continue our thought experiment. First, we nationalize all financial and financed assets for direct Fed dollars, M0, creating something like 50x as many literal dollars as existed yesterday. Contrary to folk wisdom, this is not at all inflationary in the sense of a general price level.
You open for business?
Prices are set by supply and demand, and purchasing power is unchanged. Second, we unify Fed and Treasury. Accounting fictions, who needs them? In reality, a Federal Reserve note, a dollar, is sovereign equity. In reality, a Treasury bond is not a debt, it is a restricted dollar. It does not mature, it vests. We also merge all banks, etc., into the Fed. Debts to them are debts to the Federal. There are no financial intermediaries at all, just the blinding monetary light of the naked, divine, all-powerful Federal Reserve, which now owns all productive assets. All this remains praxeologically neutral. It creates a system of state capitalism, which is extremely simple and easy to understand. There is no shock to the economy at all. It will continue to operate normally. completing the transformation. But over time, this command economy will deteriorate for lack of proper incentives. It is, after all, Soviet America. The goal here is to make America less Soviet, not more. Therefore, let's figure out how to unwind it, leaving our desired alpha-only market. These steps will not be praxeologically neutral. First, we fix the number of dollars. Put them on the blockchain, or something like that. We often hear of a central bank digital currency these days. It never has the most important feature of a proper digital currency, a mathematically bounded supply. Since fiat currency is sovereign equity, a dollar is a non-voting share of government stock. We can define dollar positions not as a raw number of dollars, but as a fraction of the total dollar supply. With a fixed dollar supply, these accounting forms are identical. If the government, like a company, can issue new shares, fractional and literal accounting diverge, and we see what diluting the dollar really means. Issuing new shares is a wealth tax on all existing shareholders. Corporations have good reasons to issue new shares, like mergers and acquisitions. They also have bad reasons to issue new shares, like funding continuing operations. A company that does this is heading for the toilet, but corporations aren't sovereign. The problem with governments is that they can live in the toilet. Moreover, if the government cannot print new dollars, it cannot conduct or promise bailouts. This means that private actors, like banks, cannot safely create money. They would just be creating little bubbles, which would pop in runs. Since this would be dangerous, it is proper regulation to make it illegal by requiring intermediaries to match the duration and currency of their assets and liabilities. Second, we auction the nationalized assets and burn the dollars received. Again, by definition, private and public purchasing power are unchanged after this auction. It will be seen that the asset prices produced by this auction are much lower than the former prices, and the interest rates are much higher. And we are back to capitalism, or at least a free market in capital.
Busy, I got a gig for you.
Yay.
Real fast.
Asset markets under capitalism. Under capitalism, the efficient market hypothesis actually holds. There is no beta, only alpha. Barring exogenous events, like a pandemic, which actually affect all assets, markets do not tend to move as a whole. No one needs to gamble to preserve capital. Speculation is only for players who have signal to add, or think they do. But how can the economy grow when the money supply is fixed? Don't all companies continuously work to grow more valuable?
Job like this, are you stupid?
Then why doesn't the stock market, which equals the value of all companies, have to go up?
Just be happy it's only your hand.
The error here is in thinking of money as a measure of value. As Austrian economists will tell you till your ears bleed, there is no such thing as a measure of value, nor is there any need for any such thing. When we talk of economic growth, we really mean an increase in the total revenues of all corporations, which is nominal GDP. Then we try to subtract out the effects of rampant monetary dilution, getting real GDP, which is the value of all the goods produced. For real GDP, we are looking for an increase in productivity, that is, an increase in the quality and/or quantity of the goods produced. If there was no need for these statistics, there would be no need for these concepts. Creating more and better stuff does not require diluting the money supply. As we saw, creating money, under fractional accounting, is just a wealth tax. Is there some reason that, without a wealth tax, Apple cannot make better phones? What? Suppose Apple makes much better phones this year than 4 years ago. It charges exactly the same for them. Everyone engages in exactly the same economic behavior, but with nicer and better stuff. In some abstract sense, Apple has grown more valuable. In the concrete financial sense, it is the same business, bringing in the same revenues, and yielding the same profits. None of this requires Apple's stock price to increase, unless it performs better than the average speculator expects. And if this does happen, it means that Apple is taking revenue away from other companies, because consumer spending, too, is constant. They will perform worse, and their shares will go down. The market, as a whole, remains flat. As it should be. Financial beta is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Why this can't happen? Is this just a thought experiment? Or is it actually a proposal? Of course not. For one thing, politics is the art of the possible, and this process is 2 to 5 orders of magnitude away from political possibility. But there is a more important problem. The advantage of this design is that it creates a sane and watertight financial system, which cannot hide systemic losses under the carpet of seigniorage. The disadvantage is exactly the same. The disadvantage is that, once this financial system can no longer hide systemic losses, it can no longer hide the reality that America loses half its GDP in red ink every year. Is it any wonder that if you drive across the country, you see a country bleeding to death, even before 2020? Well, that's exactly what you're looking at. Financially, anyway. So the message of this free market vision is not in any way a message of hope. Or at least, not easy hope, not the cheap hope our discourse so routinely traffics in. It is more the vision of Rilke. Otherwise this stone would seem defaced beneath the translucent cascade of the shoulders, and would not glisten like a wild beast's fur. Would not, from all the borders of itself, burst like a star, for here there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life.